and it takes me a second to pop it over into YouTube. So once I have that link, I'll send it to you in the chat, and then I'll hit the recording, and we'll get to it. There we go. So here's a link. Takes me a second to pop it over. Bam. There you are. We are live. Heck yes. And I'll pay attention a bit. I usually don't pay attention too much to the YouTube chats because it's distracting. But because you're sending out to your people, I will be randomly looking at the YouTube chat just to see if anybody has any, big questions about, what happened, and see if there's any themes in there. So if you guys are watching live, share this out there. You know how the censorship is. Joe's going to share it. If you guys have any questions, we're going to kind of go over the convoy and what happened, and some good and some bad, some theories, and we'll see where it takes us. But we're both boots on the ground, so we want to get this out there while it's fresh.
That's it. That's all. It sounds like a plan.
You all set?
Yeah, I'm good. I just popped it out on one, popping it out on the other right now.
Oh, actually, I should do it on my Telegram. So do you find any other, do you still use Facebook? That was your big one before, right?
Yeah, we still do, but it's like it's not as strong in our repertoire, I guess you could say. Like we still put up videos and put stuff there. Like oddly, like YouTube's been crushing it for us, and we went through such a bad time with YouTube for so long. Mm-hmm. We started a new channel. We lasted a little while. They deleted it, and then we pleaded, like, honestly, like, guys, you're making a mistake here, because they were, right. And then they gave it back. Like after about a month and a half, they're like, yeah, we actually reviewed your account and you haven't said anything wrong, and like, we're sorry, and like, we apologize for the inconvenience. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was not expecting that.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, they deleted my YouTube and then gave it back, but I've been stuck at 19,000 subscribers for like a year. Yeah. 2 years, I think. It's just like, they're like, no, nothing gets shared out. So I don't know. It's still there. One of the hassles is just uploading to all these different places. It just takes so much time when you're creating content. It's like,
it does.
So, okay, well, let's get into this. Here we go. So let's make it official. Here we go, guys. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind Body and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matthew Belair. As you know, we are currently overcoming massive, extreme, crazy censorship. So if you want to support this show, please share episodes as far and as widely as you can. Become a member at mattbelair.com, because they have deleted my Patreon as well. But most importantly, consider doing 3 kind acts wherever you are in the world today. Today's guest is the founder of The Pulse and Collective Evolution. As a journalist, he brings a balanced and curious perspective to current events, tying them into a deeper discussion of personal transformation and societal change. He also actively works to create content around how we can transition from our current societal game to one where we can thrive. Welcome to the show, my friend, Joe Martino.
That's it. That's all. It's a good little bio there.
It's short. I'm surprised how short it is. People give me like the longest bios ever, and you've done a lot. You're an awesome guy. And I was like, yes, a nice short one. I don't have to cut off like 40 paragraphs, but well, for those who don't know you, why don't you just give a little intro on yourself, man? Because, I've been following your work for a long time. You're one of the OGs in the quote unquote consciousness game, the truth game, going down all the rabbit holes, looking at the bottom, seeing what's being uncovered, and just trying to get the truth out there. So why don't you just tell the newbies who you are?
That's it. That's all. Yeah. So to keep it simple, I mean, like we started off in 2009, creating a platform, just wanting to talk a lot about, the personal experiences that I was having, and like my own, awakening, if you will, like kind of realizing like, hey, not only is the world not quite what I thought it was per se, but also I'm exploring things, relearning who I am, questioning a lot about where my ideas came from, how I accepted to believe certain things about the world and myself, or my ego, my spirituality, whatever it might be. I kind of started that journey very much at that point, going a lot deeper. It actually started a few years prior, but I wanted to put some of that online. So I created Collective Evolution, and it was like a blog at the time, just to talk about this kind of stuff. And it developed into writing about more topics and making documentaries, and then it blew up into one of the largest, I guess at the time, alternative platforms out there that was exploring anything from what we call fringy ideas to consciousness ideas, and really pushing towards, hey, what solutions can we find towards moving the world forward, and how can we reimagine, how can we have conversations about reimagining what is possible for our society. So we did that for a while, and then of course the whole censorship game came into play. And for us, that was primarily because we believe that it's important within this work to be able to show people out there why it is that we need to have conversations about creating a better world. And a lot of people are like, hey, look, I don't understand why you want to create a world that's better than what we have today, because I don't see anything that's really that wrong with it. Right. And so it's like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, it's not really about, hey, is this so wrong? Is this so this? It's like, if we don't know the level of corruption, if we don't know the level of control, if we don't know the stuff that's going on, then it's hard to justify for a lot of people why they should put some of their time and energy into considering that maybe this world isn't going to lead them towards that thriving world that they know is possible, right? So that's why we cover that kind of stuff. And after the censorship era, we decided to create the Pulse, because we had basically been shadow banned virtually everywhere on the internet under collective evolution. So we created the Pulse, took a little bit of a different angle on how we were going to talk about things. And it's been fantastic ever since that.
That's awesome, man. Well, that's a short summary, and I appreciate that. I remember the collective evolution days, and the content you were putting out there is great. And I remember you saying, like, looking at your stats, and what happened was those kind of channels sharing the truth were just crushing the stats of any kind of mainstream. And we see that now with the absolutely incredible censorship. And that's a whole topic I think we should explore on another show sometime, because it's so important, the work and the censorship, and how people like you and myself have been battling that and just trying to find solutions to get the word out there, and all the stuff that we learned about before, right? We're looking at microchips in the arms, right? And this I just recently shared this on TikTok. They haven't figured out who I am on TikTok yet, because it's getting out there. I'm not used to seeing all these notifications again, because everything is just so crazy censored. But it's like this interview with Aaron Russo, who is friends with Rockefeller, about this chip that they're going to use. Now it's becoming modern day, and they're putting it in the newspapers. And we've seen this coming for a long time. We didn't know how they were going to do it, but we did know that there were these characters behind the scenes that didn't have the best interests in mankind. Because when you want to create a utopia, free energy, peace for everybody, explore the limits of the human body, consciousness, and spirituality, well, when you have like an enemy on the other side that most people don't want to see. And that's there's a great book that Alex Sakaris wrote. He has a podcast called Skeptico, and it's Why Evil Matters, How Science and Religion Flubbed a Big One. And I've been trying to like explain this to people in different ways. And just, one of the ideas is like, well, if you're caveman days, you go out and somebody gets decimated by a lion, right? That's a very frightening thing. If you've never seen a lion before, this big, huge cat come whoop your ass, you tear your body apart, and if you pretend that lion doesn't exist, well, then people are going to continuously get whooped by that lion. But when you face it and you look at it and you understand it, then you can start problem solving ways that thing is not going to be hunting and killing you and your family, and that's kind of a pretty basic example of what's going on now. People didn't want to see the tyranny. And one of the benefits of the trucker convoy, and we're going to touch a lot on that, because, there's a lot of theories about what's going on, right? But one of the main good things is that I've been telling people Canada was bought and paid for years ago. The only solution out of this is going to be from the people. It's not going to come from politicians, because we can see how corrupt they are. Recently, they talked about the World Economic Forum. The guy pretended he couldn't hear the question. Right. And what I've learned from the Law Summit and like Luciferianism and Satanism and these guys, they can't answer the question, because then they can be held liable. So they just don't answer the question. So that's a bit of a rant, but I'd love for you to kind of speak on some of those topics.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things where, you touched on like the idea of like, we've been talking about a lot of these ideas, or at least bringing them up, having people think about them and question them for a very long time. And this event, as much as, people are like, well, it's kind of over now, or maybe it's not over. Maybe they're repositioning, maybe like, who knows what they're doing next. But, I've seen more people sort of wake up to the idea that we have to begin questioning. Like, we have no choice but to question what mainstream media is saying and what's going on in this situation. And like, I was just on the phone prior to this, with a friend of mine who, he's a businessman. He's older. He's, for all intents and purposes, like, he's very much into, the system of what's at hand, and kind of seeing the world through that light. And, he recently, over the last couple of years, has really started to expand and say, I'm not going to look at mainstream media right now. I'm going to look at different ideas. And, over the course of the last couple of years, he's really started to lose a sense of trust in what government and what mainstream media is doing. And he started to explore different ideas. And I was just talking to him, and he was just saying, he's like, honestly, this is like the craziest thing I've ever seen happen in Canada. The egregiousness of what government's doing, of what these politicians are doing, and how useless their role seems to be when you actually sort of pull back the curtain and see. It's like, these people aren't actually doing anything. They're going into the House of Commons and they're debating and questioning each other, but they're not actually debating. They're just making statements. There's no question and answer. It's just, hi, I have a question. And then Prime Minister responds with a talking point. And, people are starting to realize that this is not what it appears to be. And I know many people have been sort of waving that flag for a while, and that's okay. That sort of planted the seed and primed, but now, tons and tons of people are seeing it. And so, there's many, many things I think that are coming to light right now that are going to require, and I think this is where, I really get passionate about the work that we try and do, is that it's trying to sort of model. And I think, your podcast here, I think, does this as well. It's modeling a way of looking at this that doesn't have to be that it's like this crazy, angry extremism that we need to go and get all of our revenge and fight these people back and blah. But it's more like, look, guys, the veil is coming down. We need to be able to discuss with each other in a way that actually brings us together and allows us to have these conversations in a credible manner, as opposed to, I told you we were all right. And like, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, we can get into the blood drink and all these, but it's like, we need to be able to talk to the average person. Right. And so seeing this opportunity right now of this convoy has brought Canadians, at least, and of course, other areas of the world have been massively affected by this convoy too, and how they're talking about things. But it has brought a lot of people to this conversation that typically would not have been open to it. And so it's an exciting time to provide, I guess you could say, leadership and saying, here's how we can talk about this stuff in a grounded manner and really take advantage of the momentum that's been built right now.
I love all that, brother. And I totally agree. And so much has come up because of this convoy, including things like people talking about psyops and controlled opposition, which I think is reasonable, because when we saw that leaked email, it talked about martial law, which is essentially what this is. They're now apparently, and I don't know if it's passed on the Senate today. Have you seen the update on that? I assume it will, but they're debating it in the Senate to say, is it going to pass for sure? And it probably will, and they probably won't give those powers back. So you can seize account and property and all these kinds of things, which is frightening. But now so many people are seeing the truth about what government is. Where does their power come from? One of the things I liked in the law summit was just saying, like, government doesn't exist. It's this, fictional corporation, right? Of men and women trying to, impose their will on other men and women. And so it's inspired a pursuit of knowledge in law, which is super important, because when you go down that rabbit hole, it's actually a spiritual pursuit, and you learn more about the corruption and deception and Satanism and Luciferian in that, because they are willing to take everything from you, not from breaking a law, but from an act and statute that's harming nobody, but it's actually putting money in their bank account. And they know this. They even have their own language with Black's Law Dictionary. You'd think you're speaking English, but you're in their jurisdiction speaking another language. And so that's how they get your consent in these variety of ways. And so, seeing people rise up and all of those flags and all of those just families out, when I was in Ottawa 3 weekends in a row, and I'm super pissed that I missed the last weekend. I didn't think that they're going to be able to shut it down that quick. So I was kind of recouping. It's a lot of time, it's 10 hours of driving and wanted to be there, but they really cleared house. And this was 3 weeks of peace. Right. This was 3 weeks of bouncy castles, of partying, of Canadian spirit, of no masks on. Most of the people, I believe, on Twitter and on Facebook who are believing the mainstream news. I think that's a small percentage now because we watched in real time. The Ottawa police lied. So can we trust our police? They blatantly lied about several things, about throwing the bike. A guy had a bike and he positioned it. He moved it slightly. He didn't throw it. He did move the bike slightly, but this doesn't interrupt the horse. Why do the horses need to trample through those people? And why did they need to? They said they weren't pointing guns at people. There's several shots of them pointing guns at people. They literally beat peaceful protesters who are shouting like I love you. And from my perspective, I see that some people saying love is the thing that wins this, and I'm like, okay, but has that ever worked in history? There needs to be enough people that either unite in non-compliance or some sort of tactic, because what they use as their tyranny. There's a quote about this, where as they kind of lose their power, the last thing to have is tyranny. So they use more force. So we saw unmarked police, right? Where did they come from? Some people speculate it's UN, which I saw 2 planes land, but I didn't think they were that big. It could have been from that, but probably not. It could have been just Canadian forces that unmarked. So on people beating the piss out of everybody.
Which ones? Because I know, for example, like the ones in the greenish color there, that often had they had a black stripe here that was didn't have a mark. Is that the one people were referring to? I haven't got to look into this UN thing.
Yeah, well, I don't know specifically there, but there was a few unmarked. But yeah, definitely the green ones as well. They didn't have any kind of identification. So I've seen more reports of people coming out and basically, one person can't find her sister. I don't know if that's come back yet, picking them up and dropping them off, not, forcing them to sign something or be prosecuted. But the one guy held his ground and they didn't charge him with anything. It's fine. Take my truck, whatever. But then he comes back and his vehicle's gone. He doesn't have his keys. Yeah. So it's there are good police out there, because I had Chris Vanden Boss on and I thought about being a police officer because I wanted to serve and protect. This is when I was young. And then I fully understood what it was. And this is what I've been saying to my wife too. I was like, she's a teacher, a beautiful teacher. And, with kindergarten kids, I was like, you're a great teacher, but you're in an awful system. Right now we have this whole agenda being rolled out in our school systems. And this is worldwide, that is so delusional and satanic and Luciferian and confusing and awful. They're going to shape these kids in a really confusing way. Then they've got the attack of TikTok and all these other things that's messing up their minds, where they can't find grounded root in who they are and in God, the creator, and spirituality. How are they going to do that if they can't get the basic things met? So I'm going to shut up and let you just kind of comment on whatever you want.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there. I mean, so first off, with the police thing, I'll say outright, I haven't looked into this whole, the UN accusations and stuff like that. I pretty much saw every single type of officer there and was able to identify with, some effort where all of them came from. Not every police officer was, showcasing their name and badge number. I mean, in some cases, you would have the same uniformed officers standing shoulder to shoulder, some of them with their names covered and some of them with it not covered, right? So my general feeling is that, and you might know this already, but police legitimately, they do have a concern on a regular basis that they don't, for example, if you're out there filming with your phone, the area where police go park their civilian cars to then get into a police car, they'll get pretty upset if you're out there standing, because they face a legitimate, potential threat from people they might have put away at some point. They don't want, to be attacked. Right. So I'm thinking, if these people have been told all day long, these are extremists, these are bad, these are extremists, these are extremists, these are extremists, they might actually believe that, and they might have covered their names and tried to hide that. I really don't know. I'm just trying to throw out ideas as to what I saw there. The green, sort of helmeted, looked very holy shit, this is a legitimate Gestapo here. These, they had this dark marking on the shoulder. They were actually the equivalent of RCMP, but from Quebec. So they were a very specific group of people that a lot of people could not identify for a long time. That might be the UN people are talking about. Again, I'd have to see it myself to know. But, for the most part, I could identify. York Regional Police was there. They had RCMP. They had Ottawa Police. They were just people were from everywhere.
Even Alberta.
Yeah. And so, I don't really know what to say about was there UN per se, but the other thing is like just addressing like the idea of like the peaceful protest, right? Because this is kind of where, you know, one of the exercise we teach our people a lot in the membership is basically taking like, okay, you don't have to believe or be other people, but can you sit yourself in their perspective? Like if you were to, I'm their perspective. So whether that's a person that is just hate filled, whether that, can you somehow try and understand, can you sit and like pretend you're them for a second? What is going through their head, right? And so like, so when it comes to the peaceful protest nature of it, it's like, there are some Ottawa citizens that absolutely like they were at the very beginning, it was just honking all day long. I could understand how it felt like terrible to them. And I can understand how, you know, for some people who couldn't get access to their businesses, because again, it was like, it's not that the whole city of downtown Ottawa was shut down. This is, you know, obviously, you know this, you were there. It was like a small area. And then like there was a lot of pressure to keep areas shut down that didn't need to be shut down. Right. And so, but still these people, they felt like, oh, our business is shut down. This can't happen and that can't happen and blah, blah, blah. But really a lot of this stuff could have happened. So, you know, to some of the people there, some of the noise I can understand would have been annoying. Some of the presence would have been annoying. Like I could get that it would suck for some Ottawa citizens. And there was some bad interactions. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't common. It was like the odd bad interaction here and there where it was like, yeah, people were hurling insults at each other. Like Ottawa citizens would regularly come down and just like stand in front of truckers and like yell at them and blah, blah, blah. And then some of them would engage and some of them say, no, just like, let's move on. Right. So, but this is tension, right? I always say to people who bring this up, like, oh, you know, they tortured Ottawa citizens. I say to them, I'm like, look, when has a protest ever done anything? Right? Like taking people and marching down the street doesn't do anything anymore. It hasn't for decades, right? It doesn't, unless you have millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of people doing this in a country, it solves nothing. It's like, okay, maybe there's a few other people who think like me, and that's about it. People needed to occupy. They needed to disrupt. They needed to do something that was completely unavoidable. They had to do that because that's the only way to get anywhere in our common day and age. And that should be, recognition number one. We live in a world where people are not heard, right? You have no power as a citizen. These people can't wait 4 years to vote for Trudeau. Trudeau keeps saying, well, we live in a democracy. You could vote. Well, first off, 70% of the country didn't vote for you, you fuck, right? That's first of all. Second of all, it's like, you know, here's a guy who is saying, go out and vote. It's like, well, our mandates, I don't have 4 years to wait to vote for somebody else. These mandates need to go right now, right? So here's a situation where it's like, people had no choice. This is what they had to do. And if in a time where you're in such a dictatorship-like situation where you have no voice, what else are you to do but to disrupt, right? Nobody hurt anybody, right? So if we're talking about peace, did they hurt everybody? No. Did they damage property? No. Did they break any laws? No. Were there traffic infractions? Yes. But did they break any laws? No. This is why at the end of the day, over the course of time, this will probably become something where it's like, there's going to be legal trouble. Like the government may get in trouble for this in a big way. And I say may only because although there's grounds for trouble, they seem to have ultimate power. So they can't be held accountable, but they should be held accountable. So it's like, was it peaceful? I would say vast majority, yes, absolutely. There was no damage. There was nothing going on. But yeah, I acknowledge that for some Ottawa citizens, it sucked, right? But I'm sorry, what choice did people have? They had no choice, right?
Yeah, well, you bring up a lot of good points, and one of them is where the protest was. It was in a very small section, right in front of Parliament and a few streets over. Most of Ottawa is sprawled out, and so they were mostly unaffected. A lot of the altercations happened when the citizens came down and they were very upset. That's where you kind of got violent and more aggressive because they're watching what's going on in the news. On the flip side, you had Ottawa residents that came down and said, wow, this is not at all what they're saying. Everybody's happy. Everybody's unmasked. Everybody's dancing, right? Everyone's giving out free food. This is actually really great. And yeah, it would be an inconvenience for sure, but you're also at these, the nation's capital, and they're talking about shutting the city down. Well, the protesters would have been happy to have everybody open. We would have supported their businesses. The government shut you down for 2 years, you know, and I had spoke to multiple cops the 3 weekends I was there, and almost all of them were happy. They were like, we don't know why there's so many police here. This doesn't make any sense. You know, I'd always ask, have you seen any violence? Not one bit of violence so far. It's totally fine. But then I had talked to this one cop, and we're kind of chatting, and he goes, I said, yeah, you know, well, how do the police feel about this? And I was like, you know, I know most police, you know, are good, but some of them give you a bad rap. He goes, yeah, just like the truckers, you know, most truckers are good, but these guys are a small fringe. Like, what do you mean? I was like, well, what inconvenience are they having? He's like, well, they have to shut down businesses. I was like, no, they don't. The government is telling them to shut down, and they've been shut down for 2 years. You know what I mean? I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So what are you talking about? So, you know, when you dive in, and then you look at what the news is doing in real time. Trudeau is calling us racist, misogynist, homophobic, whatever the heck literally everything you call someone under the sun. That's what people are, which was untrue, you know, a blatant lie. Then this protest, because it's not going anywhere. And it's different than boots on the ground because the trucks disrupt, and that's like a new tactic. So maybe it can be cars, and we can kind of learn from this. What can we do strategically to keep this momentum forward? And one of the ideas that I thought makes sense is you just show up at your MP's house, because this global agenda has to be implemented at a community level. If you can stop it at a community level with knowing, number one, your school board, you need to know every member who is on your school board educating your kids, because if you have any idea how bad it is, you wouldn't put your kid in public school. It'd rather have no education than massive damaging brainwash education. And this goes for Canada, US, and probably the rest of the world. You have to really pay attention to what's in that school system now, because they've ramped it up. And then, you know, your MPs and your mayors and all those people, if they're implementing these policies, you need to show up and protest at that level. Say, we don't want this. You know, you cannot put this through. You know, you don't speak for us, and organize on a community level. That might be a solution, because we saw the response of the government when people didn't leave. Now, all of a sudden, people are getting beat down. And then we witnessed Ottawa police chief lie. So we had one step down, I think another one step down. And then a lot of the police didn't want to do this. So they had to ship them in from all over Canada and so you're getting the worst of the worst, because some police are pieces of crap. I went to law and security, and I know those people, but some of them are great, like Chris Vandenboss. Now with Police on Guard, there's thousands of officers that, you know, are standing with that. So we need people to kind of understand what's going on. And is there going to be a solution in the government? Because we're seeing, when you look at them speak, they're saying nothing. The judges in courts are corrupt. Everything is corrupt to the core. I had Timothy Paul Madden on, and he exposed the corruption of the banks in courts several times, you know, unequivocally, and they didn't do anything because they're on the same team. Government, courts, and judges and banks are all on the same team. So where's the solution going to come from? And at least Canada, now we know where we are, because in a tyrannical dictatorship, you don't get a choice, right? And that's what we're heading into. So we need to stop wasting our time on things that aren't solutions. So what do you think of all that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a tough one, because the way we have to look at it is like, where are we right now at this moment in time? Not just from the standpoint of what do our systems and infrastructures look like, and how does change happen, or how does it not happen, or what have we believed about how change happens that isn't actually true. So you consider all those types of things, but then we also consider, like, in any country, you know, you're sharing, you know, the space with at least 1 million people. And in a lot of countries, it's a lot more, right? You know, in this country, it's what, 38 or so in change at this point, million people. So it's like, you're really looking at, like, how do you get something to happen when there's tons and tons of people that are involved, and tons of people that have to agree on something? Because look, if I have an idea, and we're a group of 1 million people who believe we're awake in Canada, but, you know, 37 million people don't believe we're awake. I mean, is it up to us to enforce our will on them? Right? Like, no, right? It's more so like, we need to create a cultural shift. We need to create a conversational shift that helps people come to terms with, you know, the nature of our reality that's based on a sort of evidenced, like very clear. We can understand, we're asking the right questions. We're curious about what the answers are. We're making our way towards that. And so when it comes to solutions, I always think one of the very, very first solutions that has to be there with everything is this being able to have conversations about this kind of stuff in a grounded, meaningful, and not, hard-tempered manner that it often becomes, because that's how we're going to actually stretch beyond the gaps. Like Martin Luther King was incredible at stretching his message beyond typical gaps. So he could go beyond political gaps, he could go beyond age gaps, color gaps, whatever it was. He was incredible at making people understand his message no matter what. Right. And we saw the success that had. And although it took a long time then in the infrastructures for us to see greater levels of equality, he did something that was meaningful. And so, step one is culturally being able to have conversations where it's not just like, hey, I'm saying my message just so other people on the right-hand side can understand me, or so that other people who are awake get me. Like, how can I actually engage with other people in a way that doesn't see them as asleep, but in a way that says, have you thought about these types of things? Have you questioned these types of things? Like, have you been curious about these types of things? Like, how can we talk about this in a meaningful way? And again, this is something we focus a lot of our time on is helping people with this and trying to create content that allows, like, we kind of joke around. It's like, this is, we're creating articles, we're creating videos that you can send to anybody, right? Like you can send this to someone who's quote unquote just fully asleep, and they're not going to feel like it's fringe and weird and like, oh, well, this is too outside the box, right? That's something we aim to do, because we need millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people to be asking these questions. So that's kind of step one. And you also have sort of near-term solutions and then long-term solutions, and having the wisdom, and at least in my opinion, to say, in the near term, we have a dictator in power who has no regard for Canadian citizens, like no regard whatsoever. And he also happens to be, we also have mandates that are in place, federal mandates that are in place that are extremely damaging to people. So those are both crises, if you will, that have to be addressed today. Like, people are suffering today, right? So we can't just say, oh, well, one day we're going to create a better world. This is a near-term crisis that needs to be addressed to help people today. So in the short term, what do we do? And a lot of times in the short term, you have to engage to some extent with the existing systems. So you have to pressure the MPs. You have to provide, like, reach out to Senate and be like, look, here's all of the information that I've found, or that this group has put together, that says, this is why this Emergency Act is illegal. And if you really look at what's happening in the Senate right now, they're saying, hey, I don't see any justification for this Emergencies Act. And once they pull that, that's part of the near-term crisis. The other part is we got to get rid of these mandates. So what can be done on that level, right? So those are near-term things. That involves, we could go on all day about the solutions involved there. I hope I touched on a couple of things. But then there's the long-term, which is people who recognize, guys, the political system's not going to create all the change for us. A new prime minister is not going to fix it. A new, set of MPs is not going to fix it. There are much bigger things that we need to do. And when you're creating long-term solutions like this, you need to first accept that it's going to take a little bit. It's not going to happen next year. It's not going to happen the year after. It's going to take time, but we need to be fostering, developing, and building those conversations, again, in a meaningful way, and utilizing the current events to help people understand why it's messed up, such that they will have an invitation. They have motivation to have these longer term conversations, because it's in there where we're going to need to lay out meaningful solutions and talk with a lot of people. How are we going to solve this issue or that issue, or do this particular thing? Well, the reality is we're probably going to need to create what we might call game B examples in different places. We're going to need to show people, here's how we could run certain ideas. And I'm not talking about like a intentional community where everybody's living on one piece of land, but like lots of people aren't going to go for that. So how do we showcase how a small community of people, 1,000 people, 5,000 people, whatever it might be, can operate and exist simultaneously on a parallel system that is meaningful, and that shows the people, if you will, on the other side, oh, this is how you're operating. Oh, this is interesting. Or this part didn't quite work out so well. How can we adjust this? And this is where the engagement is going to come from people, because the MO of politicians is, I'm protecting my career. I'm trying to advance. I'm stuck and I'm sequestered by a particular system. So it's not going to come from there, but the short-term immediate solutions probably will. And again, this conversation of solutions is so vast. It's so in depth. I'm just trying to provide a little bit of like thought process as to how we can strategize on why some issues will need to be looked at in one way, other issues in another way, and how we're really in this for the long game. And the way to stay in this in the long game, so to maintain a composure, a level of spirit, a level of trust and respect and unity and love in the short game and the long game, is knowing that we're in it for the long game and we need to keep our energy up. So we need to know how to move through our traumas. We need to know how to move through the various pieces of stress that accumulate in our physiology, that accumulate in our body, and ultimately negatively affect our state of being, the way we think, the way we socially engage with each other. So we are going to have to stay in this game. So personal work and personal transformation that actually works is a very, very important part of this process as we move through what is inevitably going to continually be a rather chaotic time over the course of time.
Yeah, man, you brought up a lot of great points. And one of them that I realized a while back was this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint, right? It was like when they shut down things, I was at Blue Mountain Spa, which is really nice. And now it's when it clicked. It's like, okay, this is the official start of World War III. And then it took me 2 weeks to figure out that they want to jab needles in everybody, and then put us to the digital ID and then the social credit system, which we have teed up in Canada. And when you're talking about these alternative solutions, I do believe the solutions are going to come from a community level, family to family, community to community, and then people can choose to participate in that. One of the things I liked from David Lombard, he would say that church is people, church is community, right? So it doesn't matter which church you go to. It's very community oriented. It's family oriented. You know who your neighbors are. And I always really like that idea because the Mennonites have done it. And my friends that I have joked is like, well, maybe that was at the last reset. And the people who didn't want this new crap system, they went Mennonite, and maybe we're going to be the future ones, because that honestly does not sound bad at all. Some of the, clothes and certain things, but if I could have clean food, good community, clean water, strong friggin' furniture that will never break, erect a barn in an afternoon with my buddies and people who are like-minded, that would be beautiful. And this is what this has really set the fire on, because so many people who believed in our government and thought we had a democracy, I don't right now think Canada has one. I think we are in a tyrannical dictatorship, and we aren't going to get solutions from them. So what options does that leave us? And the good news is that there is a weak link in their armor. So if you work for a store and your manager is this tyrant, well, he says, you know what, you have to implement this tyrannical policy on these other people. So then you're the one carrying it out. You're the one actually harming people. And Mark Passio has just such a brilliant quote that says, order followers keep the system of slavery in place. And so as we go after, as a community, each and every person, in whatever means necessary, in a kind and loving and compassionate but serious and strong way, that you cannot implement this policy because it is harming our community, our family, our friends, whatever the case is, they're not going to want to do that job. And that's what's required, because from a very basic sense, every business wants to grow. And what's happened is this totalitarian one world government is their corporation, is their business. And I don't know if this is true. I think I'm pretty sure I saw an article someone sent to me that the most employed people in Canada are for the government. So all small business, rather, there's more employees for the government than now small business. And that's what they want. They can basically do 1984, So I was like, that doesn't seem right, but there are a lot of government employees. So people need to find the courage to stop doing the things that might be harming other people. Say no matter what to these jabs and all these other different type of lockdowns and things like that. And then there's also the coming out now, they're releasing the mandates. Okay, whoop-de-doo, because they have the digital ID right there. And if that gets installed, we might have communism and tyranny for one generation if it breaks, 2 generations, or infinity, because there is the hidden hand, God's spirit, and that for me has been one of the real beautiful things in this last couple of years. I've really connected to, God in a new and different way, right? It's like saying universe, and I was like, you know what, not universe. It's, that's kind of, there's a lot of new age baloney that kind of gets distorted. And honestly, going through the Bible since the Law Summit is just a book of good and evil. I read all these other religious books. I love the Eastern philosophies, and going through the Bible and it's just this story after story about good versus evil, and don't fear. Basically ridding is, I think it says, don't fear 365 times in there. And when I played it all out in my mind of like the worst case scenario, what if, I am here and there is no spirit, there is no God, and then I'm just going to be, in this technocratic enslavement forever, and it's going to be awful. Well, there's a few things that came up. Number one is that I know my heart and soul and my conscience. I'm the only one that can taint that or damage that from my choices. So it feels like I do have a soul. And there's a quote that says, "A coward dies a thousand deaths, but a brave person only dies once, or a
Mhm.
courageous man dies once." And so I know I'm going to pass, but who I am between, my first breath and my last breath is still up to me. No matter what I face, that's not up to me. That's up to something bigger. And even if I say that, it just actually reaffirms my faith in God, my faith in that there is a God, that there is spirit, there is like something greater, that I am actually a part of. And I much prefer the idea, and this is one of the things I actually liked about flat earth, because I avoided that one forever, because I avoided aliens forever because my buddies already thought I was crazy. You know what I mean? I was like, I think I was like 19, and then it's going down to aliens. It's like, no, my buddies already think I'm crazy. I'm not touching that. I don't want to know anything about that. The flat earth kept coming up. I was like, I'm not touching that, because all they're going to do is call me a flat earther. And so finally I had David Weiss on and started looking into it a little bit and be like, oh shoot, like there's a lot of stuff that, like, a lot of deceptions that I learned, whether it's a rectangle or a cube or whatever. You go down that rabbit hole, NASA is full of shit. You find so much deception that you didn't know. But one of the ideas that I thought about that I liked is, in the Bible it says you're in a firmament. Also, from the indigenous people that I've learned from and studied with, and in their cultures, they talk about a firmament too, which means you're in an enclosed capsule. This is in a lot of the indigenous cultures. You're in an enclosed capsule. So if it is true that God breathed life into man, I have that in me here now, and that's what created me. And you're in this dome with me, and I have the creator within me. That shit is so much more empowering to me than thinking about infinity. The earth is trillions of years old, and there's, I'm floating around in outer space, and it just, there's no, you're just like a dust in the wind or something, just to me anyway. So just that perspective, it was like a more empowering one. And so all of this is just to say that this whole experience, because it's traumatizing. I think what you said about learning how to go through these challenges is so important. It's you hold it in the body. It's hard to see harm on your fellow man. It's hard to watch your country knowingly fall into communism and know what is happening and try to warn people. That's really challenging. And for me, one of the big solutions is coming back to God, the creator, and spirit, my spiritual connection, because that's what gives me faith that this goodness, that this power that's in me is in everybody else too, but they might be choosing to ignore it. And that's why I feel like it's selling your soul, right? When you go into, the Luciferian stuff of Hollywood and all that, they talk about selling their soul. That's what it seems to me. It's like this selling of your soul. And maybe that's all this realm is to do your best to keep your soul and your heart and your spirit clean, to do the right thing in the face of adversity, because then you wouldn't have a free will choice. If you had no challenge, if you had no awful thing in front of you wouldn't know what you're made of. You wouldn't know what choice you'd make. So we're all learning about who we are and what we're capable of.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. I mean, trying to think of the sort of the best way to go here. I mean, at the I think at the end of the day, one of the key things is just having people get in touch with the present. Like, for example, when when our physiology starts to drift from present moment and we engage with our existing world as much as we often do, and focus on the dramas and focus on the stresses. And, when you might be in a situation where you are standing face to face with those police officers and you're like, man, there's people standing behind me with a Tim Hortons coffee cup, just like, oh yeah, we're just chilling. And meanwhile, the police have come with these batons and they're ready to beat everybody down. It's like, what is going on here? Like, I remember getting back to the hotel after one of the face-to-faces with police, and just having this feeling in myself, like I've done something wrong. Like I somehow, as a journalist and as a person who in my heart of hearts believes in the cause of what was going on, at that trucker convoy, why do I feel like I did something wrong just because there was police there? Right. It plays in this unconscious, physiologically driven story that, well, if there was that many police there, I mean, police in our society and our programming equals they're stopping people who are doing things wrong. So I had this automatic, physical feeling playing out in my body that was like, I'm identifying this when I sit with it as I've done something wrong, and I know I haven't. Right. So you can see all these layers of different bits of programming that we have, but, getting present like that, like orienting yourself to your environment, using your eyes, using your ears, using your physical body, using your awareness to sense and feel, what is it like to feel the desk I'm at? What is it like to feel the chair I'm in? Like, can I pay attention to that? Or have I completely dissociated and depersonalized myself from my physical body and how I feel things in my environment, how I feel when I take in with my eyes, my surroundings, when I hear the subtleties of the air or the ventilation systems, or, the voices that are happening in the distance. Can I sit and notice those things and sit with it and not have my mind just immediately jump to something else or whatever? These exercises, if you will, help us become more in tune with our body, help us bring us back to our body, bring us back to the energy, bring us back to whether you become more aware of your gut instincts, your whether you want to call it a soul, whether you want to call it an intuition, whether you want to call it a material instinct, right? Because there's different types of intuition, some of which are very material and some which are non-material. And when we tune back into that, I think it's then where we're operating off of something that I think is what you were referring to in a lot of what you were talking about, which is this sense of whether it be God or this sense of something greater, this sense of something that is not just my mental programming, if you will, but it's something that seems to be more true, more empowering, more, it's like, it seems to come from a place that says to me, this is where my moral courage comes from. This is where my love of connection comes from. And I think when we take the time to practice getting back into that state, using portions of our day, even if it's 5 minutes while we're in the bathroom, to feel ourselves, to feel what's going on, to sense the pressure of our feet on the ground, and make it an attempt to get back to that, we're going to gain so much in terms of level-headedness, of clarity, of repairing our social interaction, because you feel differently versus when we are not personalizing ourselves that way and taking the moment to do that, when we can easily get caught up in our phones and what the phone says and what the news says and what this and what that, like it can become very autopilot. And even though we might have a perspective that tells us, well, I know my government is lying to me, doesn't necessarily mean we're, quote unquote, awake, right? And I know it's so silly to even use that term in a lot of ways, because it can be misconstrued and interpreted so differently. But it's like, it is what it is. People use that term, and that's the way we understand it when we speak to each other. It's like it's not that we're all more awake than each other and we're fighting for who's most awake. It's just that it's like, to be alive, to be in this moment, to be in tune with our physical bodies, to be human, brings about all these potentials that you said at the beginning of the show. It's like we explore the potential of the human body and of the human spirit and of the human mind. Here Klaus Schwab is presenting this idea of a fourth industrial revolution, which comes along with all of these technological advancements and abilities to make livers, make kidneys, make hearts in labs, and then install it into human bodies when things fail. Yet we also have this more metaphysical or more non-material understanding that the body heals when we remove stress and trauma, and when we start to unlock our bodies and our mind's ability to believe that that sort of thing is also possible. So here we are going to technology without even making an attempt at mastering the organic potential that we have, right? And so my thing is, it's like that organic potential is a huge part of what I think we can all benefit from curiously exploring a little bit more, and how important that is in how all of this stuff actually plays together in a more meaningful way. Because when you start to become more calm, you emanate something differently to your neighbor who you're trying to have that conversation with about whether you think Trudeau is a dictator or not. And when you are emanating that, and they're, instead of them feeling like you're a stressed out, potentially high strung individual, right? That electromagnetic field comes out of your body. Instead of that, they're feeling a calm, centered individual. They're like, a calm, centered individual is asking me whether I feel my prime minister is a dictator, but I'm not getting an indication that there's tension here. Maybe I'll sit and think about this. Right. And not everybody you speak to is going to do that, but a lot of people will. Like, I don't regularly have negative interactions with people talking about almost anything. Like, I don't have that problem with my friends and family. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect, because I've gone through times of deep stress doing this work. But I make such an effort to try and practice that, and to take care of my energy as much as I can. And I notice a different result. So, I feel, for me, at least in my experience, that the proof of the power of that has been made clear.
Yeah, I love all that, you hippie bastard. It's
Yeah.
well, it's a real world example for me with my aunt, because she woke up. My mom and my aunt, I've been telling them a lot of this stuff for years, and they kind of see it. And my aunt was very stressed out, and so as she would relay the information to other people, it wouldn't land because of this kind of high strung energy to it. And at the same time, that's her processing this a whole new worldview of, it is not what you think it is. And when you understand how dark it is, it's pretty traumatic.
Yeah.
When you start going down these rabbit holes, you think it couldn't be that bad. I remember when I went into the human trafficking, I was like, it can't be that bad. I remember when I was in my teenage years and I was looking at things, trying to figure out what's going on. I was like, I just always knew something was right. And then I would just learn. And then it clicked one day and I go, oh my God, they're deliberately trying to kill us. Why would they do that?
Yeah.
My brain just exploded, right? I just knew something was wrong. And then I just uncover another thing. And every single thing I uncover about history, it's like, it's always the frigging opposite of what I'm told, And now it's a controversial thing to say. And I'm sure people are going to find this at some point and, give me crap for it. There are only two genders. They've only been two genders forever. Now, all of a sudden, there's infinite genders. Where did that come from? So if you think, if you don't know if you're a man or a woman, some of the other stuff of how you feel can be a different thing, but women can produce babies and men can, help make that happen. That's been biology forever. So now if this continues 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, people won't know if they're men or women, like the most basic biological thing of who you are. How are you going to find any other type of truth if that's confusing to you,
Yeah.
because of this information? So then you look at, history, and it looks like we're getting dumber. And I love the Tartaria rabbit hole, which, I think it's a new one for you, because all that, the parliament down there is just beautiful construction. And, so I was like, okay, I'm going down this one now. Well, you look at Egypt and all these sacred sites, which I've been to Egypt with scientists, mathematicians, and engineers. None of them know how it was built. They only have theories. Everybody has a theory. Some of them you resonate with more than others, but nobody actually knows. So who the hell built them, or how did we build them? Was it humans with technology that we had, and then some just took that away? And now you look at Tartaria, all these cathedrals and these amazing buildings, and the parliament in Canada, and you look at the official Wikipedia story with the mastery of these cathedrals, it doesn't make any sense. They don't line up. There's a bunch missing. So maybe they're erasing history. And now we look at the education now, it's like idiocracy. People are becoming dumber. And I remember Clifford Mahooty, who's sadly passed. He was one of my friends, and he was a Zuni elder and amazing person. He was a civil and environmental engineer. And in one of the podcasts, he told me when he was done engineering school, they changed math. And he goes, basically, they made this next generation a lot dumber. He's like, I had learned the math that works, that makes sense, right? He's like, the next generation that come through, and as I kept working, I get these new graduates. He's like, basically, with each new level of graduate, they would be dumber, where they would give you this nice scheme on a CAD, and it would be all, mapped out. And then he would look at them. He's like, do you think this is going to work in the real world? And they would all think, yeah, this is going to work. He's like, no, it's not. And so he would have to go in and actually make it work in the physical world, where they're in this artificial world. And even with the screens now, it's like people tied into the mainstream news, if they haven't figured out they're lying to them, then they're going to go down that path until either they're harmed or they figure it out. But my dad said something to me when I kept going to Ottawa. He said he was basically sad, or he was like gutted. He's something like that. He's like, I'm gutted because I've been telling him for years that the mainstream news is there to force a narrative down your throat. It has nothing to do with the truth. And so it clicked. And so as this energy and this awareness keeps going through, more and more of us are going to participate in the solution necessary. And that's all we need. We don't need everybody. I heard the is that what it's called? The Civil War in the States, the big one when they get Britain out?
I believe so.
Okay, the Americans let us know. I forget what that big one in the States. Apparently, it was only 3% of them that did not want to be ruled by Britain, right? And then so that was all that was required to get them out. And so we don't need above 50, and we don't even need to worry about convincing these people of anything. They can do whatever they want to do and not harm us. It's kind of like we're just going to move in the direction we want, because the people that I met in Ottawa, I was finally proud to be Canadian again. And then to see on the news all of this nonsense about, all this racist, and then look at what they're saying in Parliament, which I knew was a joke, but all they're spouting at like 100% lies, just lie after lie after lie after lie. And it's really annoying. And that's why I don't focus on it. But now we have more people that are willing to engage in the solution, and they understand now, well, like we need to take some action here, because this is a serious situation. And I'm curious your thoughts on Canada moving forward, because when I look at history, and this is one of the things I studied how genocides happen. And I never understood how that happened. We are getting that genocidal playbook in Canada and around the world right now. So what's happening in Canada is going to happen everywhere, because they're trying us first, because we're infiltrated by the World Economic Forum pretty deeply, as said by Klaus Schwab. And you can go look at their website and see all our members. So we know what they have planned for us with this digital ID and the vaccines and all that kind of stuff. Are we going to be able to stop it? Or is this one of those moments where you get on the right side of the Berlin Wall? And this is one of the analogies I've been, telling my wife and friends. I was like, look, the Berlin Wall didn't just happen, right? You had a lot of signs before you were in a bad spot. Then your ass was stuck on the wrong side, for quite a while. You got that consequence because you didn't want to accept reality for what it was. And is that something you think Canadians need to look at? And the final thought in this big rant, and I appreciate your patience and the listeners as Joe allows me to talk through all these things, is this global thing is never going to work, because they're never conquering the States. They're starting with the easy guys. Australia, disarmed. New Zealand, I don't know if they're disarmed, but Canada has some guns, but not a ton. And then the States, they've got a standing army. Even if they have a corrupt government, which they do, and a lot of corrupt politicians, their checks and balances over there are very different than Canada's. And even if we're going to bring in this UN police, we're going to bring in China. Bring in China and Biden does all this lunacy, which he's continuously doing all the time. And even half the population wants to do it. It doesn't matter, because all the people who don't, once you're wearing that uniform and you've declared war on the American people, they're going to end you. There's no chance of it ever working there. It's just not going to happen, So I have no fear that the States will never be conquered, but the fate of Canada is a whole nother thing.
Yeah. I have a slightly different perspective on the US. I think the US will be more difficult to conquer because of culture, and also because of the way the law is set up there. They have more ways of pushing back. And because the culture is a little different, there's more people inclined to push back. The gun thing is interesting, because while it seems like, more people have guns, so the army couldn't descend on them as easily. At the same time, it's like the power of the US Army, if they wanted to eliminate any of these citizens, they'd do it like that, right? So it's kind of like, if there was a war, it probably wouldn't last long. People would get eliminated pretty fast. But with all that said, it's like, what's the future of Canada? What's going to happen? What are we going to do? I mean, I think we were talking about this just before. It was like, never thought about leaving Canada because, like, why would you, right? It's a great place to live. For the most part, obviously it's like, when you look at where other governments are at, when you look at where other countries are at, you're like, up until recently, up until COVID, it's like, why would I leave Canada? There's not a good, clear reason. And I'm not saying that to say that Canada is the best country in the world. It's to say, what would motivate me to pack up all my things and move somewhere else if I'm not like upset with where I'm currently at? So, it's like saying, are things that much different in some countries in Europe? Well, yeah, but do those differences matter to me? Are things that much different in the United States? Well, maybe a little bit, but do those differences matter to me? Not really, right? And then you have some other countries that are not as, say, developed, which have benefits, but also cons. So, you're thinking about it, oh, well, Canada's fine. I want to stay here. But then, COVID starts and you look at the way they've handled it and you're like, this is insane. And then you look at the federal mandate saying that unvaccinated people can't get on a plane, train, or cruise. And you're like, yeah, this is insane. And then you look at the way Trudeau's been acting this whole time and you're going, well, this is really insane, right? And then you keep building this, like, I need to leave Canada. This feeling comes up. And it sort of becomes, well, do we really need to leave Canada, or is something going to change? Like, what does it look like? Like, are enough people questioning this? And like, from my perspective, like, I've been talking to a lot of people that aren't, into the alternative or independent perspectives all that much. And they're very concerned with the state of Canada right now, right? It's a massive concern around the country. Canada's being blackballed virtually everywhere around the world in the media. They're being made fun of. They're being told that they're dictators, that it's a tyrannical nation at this point in time. It is not a good look for Canada. It looks horrible. And just based on the international relations alone, I believe there's an immense amount of pressure on Trudeau to figure this out. And it could be that nobody respects Trudeau ever again, right? It could get to that point. Now, of course, Klaus will, but will other people, will other leaders, will other countries? And these are all pieces to the puzzle right now that I think are big here in Canada. Obviously, what's going to happen here in the next, I'm going to say 30 days, is I think going to define a great deal about what type of Canada we're going to see over the next little while. Are people going to kind of just settle back down and just like, it is what it is, we've been defeated and the government's just going to keep doing what they want to do? Are people going to organize? Are conversations going to rise? Are there going to be greater movements? I tend to feel that more shit's going to happen. More people are going to continue to push back. But Canada's using its force. They're using their financial sanctions on their own citizens. They're doing all these different things to try and, basically grasp at straws at this point to maintain control. I don't think it's going to go well. My personal feeling is Trudeau's destroyed his career. Jagmeet Singh's destroyed his career. They'll never be respected ever again as politicians. And, now it's up to somebody else to step up and say, hey, we have a better vision for Canada. At least, again, going back to that short term solution point of view. And it's up to them to step up and say, hey, we need to call an election. I know nobody wants an election right now, but it needs to happen. Or some pressure has to come down that gets Trudeau to resign and some interim position comes in. I've heard that it's possible that Chrystia Freeland would be the interim, which is equally as terrifying as Trudeau.
If not worse. That girl has no soul.
Right.
World Economic Forum puppet again. It's just brutal.
Exactly. So, for us, we're kind of, it's going back to the presence being in the body, right? It goes back to when we are clear, we're not operating off of stress. Or like, if you look at the intuition studies, where you have access to greater intelligence, if you will, the more you've sort of not allowed stress to overtake your body, the clearer you're going to think, the clearer you're going to feel, the more you're going to have gut reactions that are meaningful and not based on drama, not based on stress, not based on high tense emotion. And so going back to that state and saying, okay, where do I need to be right now? What is it that I want to choose and what I want to be? Like, I feel like being in Canada for the next 30 days. Yeah, I'm okay with it. Something could change. Something could change. And it's like, okay, it's clear we now have to get out, right? Being in Canada for the next year, it feels like that's probably what's going to happen. But I'm so open, right? I'm not rigid in the thinking. I'm not rigid in my decision making. When I think about it, and I think it through, I go, I want to stay here and sort of push back on this stuff, because you're right. If it starts here, it's only going to spread, right? So, I'm not saying I got to be a martyr and I got to sacrifice myself for everybody else, but it's like, I am connected to a collective, and it does matter that people push back. And if I'm not going to push back, who will? Right. So for me, it's about saying, yeah, I'd like to stay here and I'd like to push back on this. And I'd like to use whatever I can, whatever skills I have, whether it's exposing what's happening, helping people move through trauma and stress, whether it's helping people, question things and get back to their curiosity and have conversations in a meaningful and grounded and impactful way. I'll use all these skills I have to help make this happen and stay here. But I trust that if there comes a point where it's very clear it's time to leave, then we'll leave.
Yeah, man, very well said. It reminds me of this analogy of war, and I understand this through martial arts, where if you're in battle, in a fight, you need to stay calm, cool, and collected, right? So you just got punched right in the face and it hurts. You need to still remain calm, cool, and collected. You don't get angry. That's how you always know when somebody does not fight, because they're really angry, and you're like, bro, you better knock it off. I'm gonna kill you, So right, but then when you see somebody who's really calm, you're like, oh shit, probably don't want to mess with that person, because
this is scary.
why aren't they afraid, right? Because they train. And you think about the samurais back in the day, or Braveheart, if you're going to engage in that type of battle, and let's say, hey, like, Joe, are we going to go into a Braveheart battle? And everyone's like, oh crap, like Canada's about to go to war just like that. Well, if we were going to engage in that type of war with, those maces and friggin' swords and bow and arrow to the face, the best chance we have of survival is remaining calm, cool, and collected the entire time, as there's horses and all that. That's the only way you would get there. But you would also have this very strong connection with God, because you'd be like, I'm going to survive this, God willing. That's it. It's a full surrender. And I think that's powerful too. And we're kind of getting fragments of that. And one of the things you're speaking on is removing fear. Because if you are fearful, if you go into that war fearful, if you go into that situation with fear, you're not going to have the same decision making. You're not going to be able to respond to what's happening. And again, in that war scenario, martial arts scenario, it's so quick that you need to respond to each and everything through mastering yourself. Right. And that's why that's a beautiful practice, is in what you're saying, is like, we need to master ourselves to have our own power. And that's removing fear. And when I'm talking about removing fear, I do a lot of my coaching and a lot of training on that from extreme sports, from martial arts, because danger is real. If you mess up doing the trick, you could go to the hospital, you could break your legs. If you mess up in combat, you can die. These are you can actually die in extreme sports quite easily too, if things go badly. So how do you manage that courage? And in life, right, when we're pursuing our dreams or we're responding to a very challenging situation, it's seeing it for what it is, but allowing your intuition, your connection with God and yourself to make that decision. And for me, in learning to trust myself, learning to listen, learning to see things as they are, and being open to the information, the thing that I need to do is always clear. But then when I need to make that choice, it might be quote unquote scary or illogical or with no certainty. But in my heart and my soul, I know I have to do it. And then I watch God respond and take care of me and give me what I need. And so I think that perspective for moving forward is really, really important. And the way that this thing could end, one of the things I love about this convoy, even though I know you've seen this and maybe you want to talk about it or not, like the controlled op perspective, where it was about to be hijacked, and it was so we get the Emergencies Act and all that kind of stuff. Again, it's granted theory, a valid theory. It could be in the States too, because they want to, they still got food shortage teed up in their stuff, and the economic crash teed up to kind of bugger people up. But just like in war and in martial arts, you might think something's going to work one way, but then you implement it and it doesn't work exactly how you thought.
Yeah.
So with all the people there, it gave a lot of people hope. It got a lot of people off the couch. It sparked something worldwide. It got people talking and questioning. It exposed a lot of truth. And one of the things I really liked was seeing the kids stand up and walk out of school. And that's one of the things that's really bugged me with the parents masking their kids. And I was like, why is nobody standing up for the mother effing kids? This, what the hell? And so now you see kids start standing up for themselves. And one of the things I recognized, because I started to speak with a young man who was struggling, and a lot of kids are struggling through this. And what I realized was that these children are not seeing a mass movement of parents stand up against this nonsense. They're just accepting it. So when you're a kid, you're supposed to listen to your teacher, listen to your mom and dad, not talk back and just obey. And they're like, no, something's off, right? Everyone's telling me to just accept this. My teachers are telling me to accept it because that's what they're doing in the education. Even within the United States, they're already calling January 6th insurrection like a racist act, right? They're trying to do that in Canada. They're saying it's a whole racist thing. And so they've got this agenda that they're just spewing into these kids. And so when the convoy happened, these kids say, hey, you know what? There are good people. And you listen to them, like what you spoke about, how your energy is centered and you're portraying like something in a way. And then you got these other people on the other side saying in this frantic way, you're a racist, you're this and that. And, you look at the two sides, you're like, you know what? That one doesn't make as much sense. It's not being delivered in a quality way. And you look a bit nuts. And when I put the two side by side, one resonates a lot more. It makes more sense. And now I can go verify it. Just like Canada being a dictatorship. Well, we can verify that through the actions, knowing that Trudeau is one of the Klaus Schwab's global leaders. We can look at all those people. So now we can identify them. And there are so many ways for this agenda to fail. There are so many ways to bung up what they want to do. And now everybody in Canada who's seen this trucker convoy is chatting. They know about I like calling him Uncle Klaus. You see that picture? You ever see that picture of Klaus with like his like wearing some sort of white dress and this hat and his butt's out, because they're all like pedophiles and stuff. You ever see that gross one? I don't know if I was going to ask you if you think that's real. I think it is real, but it gets pretty dark. Like these people are legit pedophiles. I saw something with the World Economic Forum wanting to change the age of consent. They go, should we change the age of consent to like 13 or 14 or something? Like, these guys are sick. And that's what the end goal with a lot of this stuff is, a normalization of pedophilia. It's all distorted, but that's really gross. I learned that from human trafficking and learning stuff that I did not want to know and I did not want to accept. But over a while, the evidence was overwhelming. So how do I protect my family from that? How do I ensure for future generations they're not going to be in slavery, or they're not going to be predated?
Yeah. Victim of a predator.
Victims. That's just go with victims. They're not going to be victims of something like this, because if I imagine it doesn't exist and then somebody becomes a victim, then that's awful. So I can do something like building strong children, create learning and seeing, okay, this is a problem, but now I focus all my energy and love and care into a solution. And so more people are seeing that now. They say, oh, you know what? This is a much bigger problem than we thought. Now we need to go to the solution, because if that digital ID now comes in, then we are in a real world of hurt. And so there are so many different ways that this can fall apart, where people say enough is enough. Do you know what you're doing if you accept this? You think you need to be brave now? What will our children or our children's children need to do? There'll only be like one. If you can be like, quote unquote, awake, those who have eyes to see and ears to hear now with this nonsense, we are gaslighted, called racist, lied, basically, slandered in all these different ways now. So how hard would that be when they have all this system fully installed? This is a moment for every person to gut check your soul and say, okay, what can I do in my solution, in my community? And you don't have to fix all of it. Just being aware of it and using prayer and saying, I'm willing to support the solution. I'm willing to have open and meaningful conversations. I'm willing to, do what I can to master my own body. And that's why, a martial artist or somebody who's really strong and connected, they don't ever need to fight because people don't mess with them. Right. Yeah. Like, the stronger and more capable you are, People know that, and you don't need to prove anything to yourself, right? You are a strong and capable person, and that's why all these quote unquote conservatives are people who live out of cities. They know how to grow food. They know how to survive. They're connected with the land, and usually they're connected with God. And in the city, that's where you got more Babylon. That's where you got a little bit more sinful nature, because it's like going to a carnival, but sometimes the carnival is like boobies, right? So then you're like, oh, I'm going to go to a strip club. Then I'm like, oh, I'm going to try this alcohol. Oh, I'm going to try out this drug, right? And then all of a sudden, your decision making isn't as sound as you want it to be. And the people out, a little bit more connected to nature, like, you know what, you can make that choice, but you can't blanket that on me, because if you enforce this on me, that and the Mennonites, they don't trust the government, smart, and right, and they don't trust healthcare, smart. Yeah. They knew what was going on, and they trust God. And so why can't that be allowed? But another quote that is important is, anything that seeks to restrict or bind by definition is Luciferian. And all of this energy is trying to restrict and bind everything. So I feel like it's a very ambitious and stupid thing to do, because these people literally do not have hearts and souls. They're willing to do any kind of evil to you. So that means they have no idea what the human spirit, or the spirit of mankind rather, is capable of. They have no idea what God is capable of. And that's really dumb. So I think that they're betting on the wrong side.
Yeah. There's so many deep areas we could go into with regards to this, in terms of like, the battle of good and evil, all these different things. I think at the end of the day, it's like, at this moment in time, humans have a choice. People have a choice as to what it is that what they want to do and what they want to support. We're either going to continue to sort of sit back and let life happen to us, or we're going to kind of take a moment to say, do I want to have a say? Do I want to be empowered? And I hope it's not, we think we're empowered because we can vote. I hope we don't think that way only. I hope we consider that, there's much more empowerment that comes from ourselves as people when we decide to engage in our community in a much more impactful and meaningful way. And I just think we're being called upon with moral courage. Like, do we have the moral courage to stand up and say something and do something at a time where things are getting very hairy, whether it be in Canada, whether it be throughout the globe? Like, I don't want us to necessarily forget that, for the last 2 years, virtually the entire world has been spreading a narrative about a particular virus, and the amount of censorship that is completely incomplete. I mean, we have not been given the entirety of what to consider when it comes to this virus. And I'm not trying to sit here and say, whether no virus existed at all, or that, the entire thing is a hoax. But it's more so that any healthy civilization would encourage the curiosity and the questioning of many of the things that have happened over the last little while. And does it feel okay to that, we haven't had that we haven't had any of that type of conversation? And yes, where it comes from, most of us know that it comes from, some sort of hidden hand that appears to be controlling and shaping and having a lot of power over narratives, whether it's completely global, whether it's a group of people. Like, it's so complicated to pull all the evidence together to know for sure exactly what is going on. And as a result of that, we can best help our fellow citizens by just saying, ask questions, look at these discrepancies, look at these problems. There are people coming out of mainstream media that are blowing the whistle saying, I worked for these institutions and I can tell you that there's problems right now with COVID. They're hiding information. People aren't allowed to report on information. Journalists are being, basically said, you're not allowed to talk about this. You're not allowed to write articles about this. You're not allowed to do news about this. Utilize that to our advantage, to use that to say to people, hey, we need to start considering some other perspectives. Something's wrong here. Something's going on. And in my view, those are the ways in. And if we're going to be afraid to do that because we don't want to be disliked by people, we don't want to be disliked by our friends, by our family, it's an opportunity for us to have a gut check. Like, what is it that we're so afraid of about how people perceive us? We might all have different stories when it comes to that. And is it worthwhile for us to do some work on that? That's for each of us to decide. For me, if I'm worried about the way people perceive me, I usually do something about that. I check, what am I so afraid of? Like, where did this story come from? Like, why do I feel this way? Why am I restricting my expression? And it's not like I'm expressing bad or terrible or hateful ideas. I'm expressing things that I feel really clear about, that I feel really good about, but that I know some people might react harshly to because they disagree with me. And that's not necessarily a good reason, if you will, to hold back. And that's where the moral courage comes in, and the courage to do our own work at the same time. So, those are some of my thoughts.
I love it, buddy. Well, I remember, so as a martial artist, I always like think about, is it like, should I ever just whoop someone's ass? Like, when is it appropriate when I lay an ass whooping? You know what I mean? And it's never happened, right? So, right, in 99 times out of 100, it's not appropriate. But I do imagine scenarios where, like I thought, like, okay, if someone's going down the street, let's say, and some guy smacks his girlfriend or his wife hard, you know what I mean, or punches her, something crazy. Do I go kick his ass and then give him a taste of his own medicine, or do I just break it up? I don't know. So it's like one of those scenarios. But when I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, it really helped me because there's a quote in there, and the Bhagavad Gita is similar to the Bible in that story. It's a good and evil story. And so one of the parts it says, most people think that violence is when you physically harm someone, but when you live in the realm of Maya, so illusion and deception and deceit, and in the Bible it says Lucifer's allowed to deceive, and you see somebody in Maya, a delusion, and you don't offer them the truth, you have committed violence. And that's always stuck with me. And some of these things like are harder. It's like when you're talking about censoring yourself, I constantly in the back of my mind consider censoring myself for the man and woman gender thing. Right. Because it's so hate filled on the other side. I was like, it's okay that I believe in two genders. It's okay.
Yeah.
If you can give me good evidence and explain to me why there's infinite genders now. And I had my cousin try, to explain it to me. It was complete nonsense. It made no sense. And I was like,
Well,
I can identify, from what you say is like, I can believe that I can believe that I'm a woman and dress like a woman and even change it, but I'll never be able to give birth. So biologically, I'm not. I can never be. I was born a man. I am a man. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And I can believe and wear all the things like what happened to like, isn't it okay to be a more effeminate? Boys are supposed to be roughhousing and this and that, blah, blah, blah. Right. Well, boys could be effeminate and that's just it. They like different things and more traditionally feminine roles. That doesn't make them a woman. It doesn't make them gay either. You know what I mean? And so, we get into all this thing that just creates a lot of confusion with the kids. And one of, if you want to say something, go ahead. I'll remember what
I was just going to say, like, I feel like that whole discussion, because I've talked about this a lot with people, and a lot of it comes down to like words, right? Like there's so many new words. There's so many distortions of words that are happening, like gender versus biological sex. Like, when you say biological sex, there's only two. I go, yeah, I mean, there's only two. But then now the way people discuss it is they say, well, no, gender is different. It's not necessarily biological. Gender is more of this other. So it's like we're all on different pages too about what words mean. And that's what also makes it really, really complicated, because like, I agree with you when it comes to biological sex. Yeah. Two different people are there's two, you have a man or a woman, right? And then there might be some very, very, very rare specific cases where somebody, kind of has both things going on. And it's like, okay, but that's like super rare. Right. And it's not to say they don't exist. It's just, it's not a massive societal issue that we have to discuss because it's happening so often. But, now with with gender stuff, for me, what's complicated is like, look, if somebody wants to go ahead and today they feel like, you know what, I don't know if I feel like I'm a male or if I feel like I'm like, again, it does get very complicated, right? In the wording, but it's like, okay, as long as you don't then say that anybody who is confused or misgenders you or mislabels you is not a terrible person because they look at you and they go, you look like a biological female. And if I say, oh, hey, no, I was just going to let her go first. And then they fucking rip you apart because it's like, I'm actually a he. It's like, well, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Well, that's an act of violence. Like, that's where it starts to get really complicated. Is like, it feels like people are so hypersensitive to this stuff, not recognizing that it's like a lot of the different issues that are happening in the LGBTQ space and all that stuff sometimes are so charged and they're so hypersensitive to any form of questioning, because people don't understand it fully. And in order to understand stuff, you have to ask questions, right? So you have to, hey, what is that exactly? Or what do you mean? Or I didn't, but it's like people lose their mind when people ask questions, right? And this culture of hypersensitivity towards almost everything, whether it be, gender issues, whether it be racial issues, like we throw around the racist word like liberally now. Like it's like someone doesn't even have to be racist and they're racist. That's a really, really difficult culture to live in, because now you're like, wait a minute. All I asked you was like, do the black pants look better on me or the white pants? And now all of a sudden I'm fucking racist. Like this is real, like what's happening. Right. And I just think to see what happened in this convoy, where an entire movement was labeled racist, shows that our culture has very little disregard for the meaning of words and extremely high hypersensitivity to things that are happening. And that's never a recipe for meaningful dialogue and meaningful progression of ideas. Because yeah, I do think there are racial issues, and I do think there are inequality issues. And I do think, but if we're not going to talk about them in a meaningful way, we can't solve anything. If we can't identify a problem clearly, how are you going to solve it? You can't, right? So we need to be able to identify a problem clearly. And a lot of that is being able to clearly define it, clearly talk about it, clearly figure out what the issue is, and not just say everyone and everything is racist and therefore it all needs to change. It's like, great, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? So it's a very, very sensitive time, which is unfortunate, but it also, it pulls out, it forces us to have these conversations that indicate the complexity, that indicate the many layers, and that indicate the what is the state of being of somebody if they're this hypersensitive. What's going on if we're this hypersensitive, if we can lose our minds on a dime over nothing? What is going on in us, right? So there's value in this situation as well.
Yeah, I think you articulated that very well, and that's one of the main things you going on. You kind of characterize as the left. Well, I would say on the political spectrum, or whatever people would share it as, is like, I would say I was super left. I want equality and opportunity for everybody. However, when that gets hijacked and changed into something else, then now we're facing a different issue, and that's how this, like, Satanism and Luciferianism is able to kind of corrupt and deceive and manipulate. And even the wording, that's what they do in law and these other things. They begin to corrupt and deceive the wording and things, so it creates confusion, and that confusion creates anger, because these people are less connected with what is true. Right.
Yeah.
And because there is, one of the things in this new age community people talk about, and I see the defense. And when I was actually talking to a buddy, you start to see these propaganda things come out. He goes, oh, your truth is, not the ultimate truth. I was like, no, it's just my perspective. But like, I can confirm that, like, Klaus Schwab did write a book, and these are some of the writings in the book, and you can go confirm that. So yes, it is true that he wrote a book, and it is true that this is where it's going, because they wrote it down. You're choosing ignorance. Ignore ants. You're not looking at what's going on. And so when people get in confusion just with any of these issues, then they start going crazy and attacking other people. They're not being kind, they're not being compassionate, they're not being considerate. Right. And so then something is off, that the quality of their information or truth probably isn't as good. Because if you sit down and explain something to me in a meaningful way without shouting at me, I will apologize and I'll say thank you for helping me understand that, and I'll choose, respect. But when they're creating these things through education, media, and all the various tactics, it's something that really bothers me, because I know they're architecting harm on purpose. And we do have a pedophilia, human trafficking. Justin Trudeau's friggin' two buddies are in jail for pedophilia. Like, these guys actually are that. It's so sick and horrible what it is, at the root of it, and what they want to do to our kids. It just really makes me freaking livid. So as far as the solutions, and I'll kind of close it up here if you want to, add anything else, because we'll probably chat all day. But when I think about the solutions, I think it's get right with God, whatever that is for you. Figure out who and what God is to you, and find that and connect to that, because that's what's going to guide you through everything, in my view. Then we need to figure out what we're going to do about this media. So whether we need to make it, so people aren't pumped, if we could just shut off the media, that would be phenomenal, and only find and promote and support people who are telling the truth. That's why it's being suppressed, right? It's been incredibly challenging for me the last 2 years. They've shut off basically all my ways to get the information out, and for me to be able to support my daughter and my family has been very hard, because from getting 150,000 downloads down to, like, in 1 month, right down to like 28,000, right? And then censored again, and then deleted, and then deleted and deleted. It's a little bit disheartening, but I know in my heart and my soul it's something that I can do to contribute. And if I can find something better to contribute, then I'm going to do that. That's why I did the Law Summit. That came up, and help people figure out, and then I figure out more deception from the courts, and just deception after deception. So when I uncover those, then I'm like, all right, well, what's the solution? How do we find the solution? You just keep going. And then education, those are the three keys for me. And if we can do that, as an individual, and as a family, and as a community, and you can't make a choice for anyone else, it's empowering yourself. But for me, it's going to be God that's going to be guiding me through all of this, and myself and my own soul. And then if I think tactically, the media to share the truth, so people, and to kindly and compassionately tell and offer the truth when someone's in deception. And then just letting people know the dangers of education and what can happen in a very short time. They're making very confused slave children. That's what they want, wearing masks, muzzled. One kid, his parent was saying that he's supposed to look down, forcing transgender stuff like crazy to the kindergarten kids. And even if, you're on that side of the thing, right? I don't bring in a stripper, to a kindergarten class, right? It's not that time for that. Being a kid is confusing enough, right? You know what I mean? You need to be able to be a little bit older. In Canada, you can do gender blockers, I think at like 12 and 14, and not tell your parents, right? You can't get a tattoo. You can't sign off without a tattoo, but you can change your gender forever at 12 and 14. You don't have the capacity to make that decision at that time. And if you say that, now they're even putting dads in jail. So this is very, very bad. And this has never happened before. It's not like that happened in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s because they were hating on certain people. It's because it wasn't architected yet. They weren't ready to throw that out. And that's a very dangerous thing, because we're going to lose a lot of kids that way to suicide and mental illness and all kinds of awful stuff. So that's kind of my
there needs to be a deep discussion on this, like a deep, open, honest, transparent discussion on this transgender issue when it comes to age and all this stuff, because there's so we don't understand it entirely, right? And I'm not saying this from the standpoint of somebody needs to come in and regulate what's happening and there needs to be oversight control. It's like we need to be able to sit down and have an open, honest conversation about the potential dangers, because as we understand it up to this point, you're right, kids don't have the capacity to make these decisions at these ages. And the potential downsides are that we're going to be creating a more, if someone is 13, 14, makes a decision without the capacity to do so, changes their mind at 17, 18, and things are not quite okay, you're now increasing this mental health crisis that is going to continue to spread throughout the country. And when you have a growing number of people having these types of issues, it's not good for anybody. Like, nobody benefits from this. So even though there may be some rare cases, perhaps, where people, are making the right decisions at the right times, it's like there's a much larger issue that needs to be discussed openly, honestly, and transparently. I don't think we should just, well, everyone's allowed to make their own choice and let's just shut up and let's just, blah, blah, blah. Like, let's just not talk about it because it's too offensive. It's like, we got to talk about it, right? Because from what we understand psychologically and medically, like, this is not the right time, as you pointed out. It's not the right time for us to be, allowing this to happen per se. But, again, just us talking about this, people are going to be, oh, well, you're transphobic and you're this. And it's like, it's really not. I have friends that have done this, have gone through with this. It's more so, I also saw that there was a lot of mental illness issues prior, and there's a lot of mental illness issues now. And I'm not sure if it was the right decision for that person, for the person I'm talking about right now. It's just unclear to me, because for some people, this is part of that story, right? For other people, they might know 100% and that's beautiful. Let them do their thing. I think we're overlooking a lot of details with this, and it is complicated. And I think there needs to be a discussion, but, in terms of like solutions overall, like I said, I think hit them before, but I'll just summarize them real quick. We got to learn to have conversation in a meaningful way. We got to have the moral courage to do so, and understand the best ways to actually reach across the gaps. How do we reach across political gaps? How do we reach across generational gaps? How do we speak to anybody about meaningful things in a way that's impactful and that is respectful? These are all important things to develop and understand. And, again, we do a lot of this stuff with our work, and, trying to help people have better conversations and do so in a meaningful way. And then understanding that some things are near-term solutions that we need that might involve using some of the existing infrastructures, and some are long-term that are going to be about creating parallel systems, that are going to be about having new conversations. But we can't get caught up in obsessing over just the near term and blinding ourselves to the longer term solutions that need to be there. Otherwise, we don't we don't like encapsulate the near-term solutions with the knowledge and wisdom of what needs to be long-term and what needs to think outside the box, right? So I personally split my time about 50-50. I'm focusing on helping people question things, near-term solutions, and then 50% of my time long-term. How do we look at parallel systems, build parallel systems, increase the conversation around that, increase the embodiment of that, right? So that's just kind of how I do it. But, things change and they evolve and they adjust as we learn more, and nothing's perfect. So as long as you're open to keep updating your ideas and not getting stuck, then that's it. That's all.
Yeah, I love it, man. You had a lot of great points there, and that's it. I like the formula for truth I talk about a lot, where it's just that, people have their own perspective and truth evolves, right? And you just are open fully to somebody's other perspective. And so when someone's shouting at you and name calling and they just write you off, that's one of the tactics, right? Because they want to, they're trying to create communism. They're trying to create this technocratic, they need this divide, and they're using you by being violent. And so if you're the one shouting and screaming and you're all upset, you're probably not grounded in truth, right? You saw the candor of the people that were even getting beaten. They stood there peacefully for 3 weeks. Even with the police, they tried to incite the truckers over and over. It just exposed who they were. So this energy of freedom is strong. It sparked that, and it's sparking new conversations, and it's showing, unfortunately, there is a side, and maybe some of those sides you need to kind of protect yourself when somebody's trying to harm you. And that's what's going on. They're harming whole entire countries. They've been harming people for 2 years by shutting down business, massive increase in opioid deaths in Canada and around the world, mass increase in suicides, liberties taken away, businesses shattered. So, this has got to stop. And that's because there is a truth, right? And we need to be open to finding that. And while we do, we need to be open-minded to someone else's suffering, someone else's perspective, someone else's point of view. And if you're not trying to, you're free to do anything that you want if you're not harming me. I don't mind. But if I don't want to participate in that, I need the freedom to participate in my own way, even if it is a mistake, to make my own mistakes, because that's how I learn, and that's how I grow, and that's how I navigate this reality. And you should have the freedom too. And I'm not going to enforce my views on you. And you can disagree, and you can vehemently disagree, right? And maybe sometime I'll come around and I'll agree with you and realize that I was incorrect. And that's because we're open to both sides. It's not, you don't shut it down. You're like, okay, explain this to me. Where are you coming from? Right? Does that make sense? And that's why with this whole entire narrative, you and I have known the truth since the beginning, because we look at both sides and we have them explain it. Well, when one explanation doesn't cut it or doesn't make sense, or you can see it's clearly manipulated, the truth is self-evident, right? And so so we could chat all day, but I'll let you go. Thanks for this, buddy. Is there anything else that you want to say that you wish we had talked about, that you want to leave the listeners with? Where do they find you? And thanks for coming.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. I mean, we hit a lot there. There was a lot of different things. I mean, I would say that, at the end of the day, what's going to emerge from this Convoy stuff, just keep an eye on it, keep an eye on different people's accounts, different Instagram accounts, websites, YouTube channels, whatever you like. I think movement is still going to come. I don't know what that's going to look like entirely. And we're actively engaged with a number of different, not the organizers that are in jail right now, blah, 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 but, people that everybody there was no organizers, if you will. Everybody there was an individual there on their own accord, that choosing to be there. They weren't following each other's lead. It was group decisions. It was, but anyway, we're engaged with people there quite a bit, and trying to see what's going on. And yeah, you can keep up with our work on the Pulse. The Pulse.one is our website. We also have YouTube. You can find us on the Pulse. The Pulse_1 is pretty much all of our social media. We keep things real. We keep things going. And we like to joke that we're the independent media that you can easily send to your friends and family. Like that. No one's going to think you're a nut by sending them our stuff. That's kind of how we try to position it. But it is what it is. And thanks for having me on. It was a lot of good stuff to talk about there. And yeah, you got to come down and see the alpacas. Had to circle it back to that.
Yeah. If you don't know, Joe has alpacas, and my daughter has met them. They're hilarious. As I was just thinking, you're like the 1-2 punch. You're like the jab, right? And then I come in with, the right hand that just knock them out. Here's a nice sampling of what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, also Luciferian Satanism, pedophilia. So yeah, sorry about that.
yeah. And that's all stuff, we used to talk about and still talk about a little bit, but where, we just kind of repositioned and said, okay, for right now, what can we talk about? You know what I'm saying? So that's,
well, you need the steps. And then we've seen that before with a lot of people, right? They need that baby step of information to then get to the next step and get to the next step, right? You don't want to kind of club them. And it's the pursuit of truth. It's just, when you do that, you keep uncovering new rabbit holes of deception that are pretty big. And some of them, they're deep held beliefs, right? And so as long as you're open to having a conversation, I think you're going to be fine. And I know we're going to win this, because they've been trying to snuff out the truth for 2 years and they haven't been able to do it. Right? They're not going to be able to do it. So if we can remove fear, get right with God, do our little piece, with mastering our own selves and what we want to do, that's what we're going to connect with. Because if it all goes to crap, we're still going to have that community. And even worst case scenario, worst of the worst, communism comes and we die. Well, a coward dies 1,000 deaths, but a brave person, a courageous person only dies once. And the moment we took our first breath, it's getting late, our first breath, we were doomed to take our last, right? And so it's those moments in between who define who we are, and we get that choice. So even if it was terrible, none of the beautiful moments of my life would have been diminished. If anything, I should appreciate them more, and appreciate the moments that I have, and the days that I have, and the time that I have while I have it, even more, even if it were a more depressing scenario. But I do believe that there is a God and a creator and a source and a spirit and a soul within all of us. And we just need to learn how to connect with that, and it'll help you remove fear, navigate this place, because it is a scary place to be in, but it can also be empowering. And I feel like we're here to help. There's a lot of ways we can support and help creation, humanity. And I love the Native Americans with 7-generation thinking. Once you get out of your head, and how can I help my community, how can I be a good part of this world, what's the thing that I can offer, what's my gift, who am I, where am I being led to? It makes for a meaningful, fulfilling, and beautiful existence. And there's never been a more important time to be here, to see all of this challenge and chaos and darkness, to say, you know what, I'm going to stand up for whatever the solution is. Freedom, freedom is a beautiful thing. And so something all we can usually get on board. Most people are down with freedom.
Well, according to the Washington Post, wanting freedom is equivalent to white supremacy.
Oh yeah, was that legit? I remember seeing that.
I haven't verified it myself. I haven't verified it myself, but it seemed to be that's what was printed.
I saw that. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's a few of them coming. It's like full on 1984. It is like the Ministry of Truth, 1984. It's just crazy, man. So yeah, we're going to get through this. You can't snuff out the truth. It's just so absurd. And the people who get caught in that deception, they get caught in that deception. And the more we can be that embodiment of like, oh, you need to do this. Well, I'm strong and I'm centered and I'm kind and I'm put together and I have it. So they're going to want that, right? It's like, why are you all those things? This is why, and then they see that opportunity. So great work, buddy. Been doing good work for a long time. Appreciate you getting your butt down to Ottawa, being there. So, unfortunately we couldn't meet up while we were down there. It was a bit, it's big, there's a lot of shit going on. So
yeah, it's pretty, it's hectic, but in a meaningful way. It's really cool.
Yeah. Well, keep up the good work, and thanks everybody for watching. Anything else you want to say? You said social media, all that.
No, likewise. And yeah, I mean, you can check us out. Just search for the Pulse. You'll see it, a nice little black logo with the white writing. That's it. That's all.
Oh yeah. All
you
right.
know,
All right.
I appreciate you having me on and everything that you're doing as well.
Thanks, brother. Okay, guys. We'll see you in the next one.